I can't hear anything.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If y'all can hear me, give me a thumbs up. For some reason, the space was acting up earlier. I had to restart. If y'all can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Again, if y'all can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Okay, good deal, good deal, good deal. Just checking. So I don't know what went on with the last space. I feel like since we've been getting deep into issues, my space has been kind of been targeted. Um, anyway, I digress. We're going to get started in a moment. The question for today is a very powerful one. Bringing scholarship. My co-host should be back up in a moment. The scholarship that we're bringing is we're going to look at the origin of word Indian. I wrote a whole book that discussed this during my tenure at the Historically Black College. And I think Wani has also written scholarship on this as well. Very interesting. What we need to identify is what Antonio Gramsci told the world. So there was a guy named Antonio Gramsci. Um, he was an Italian during Nazi Germany. Antonio Gramsci found himself in jail, um, and he was confused, like, why in the hell am I in jail? And he started to get the message under Mussolini's regime. And he got the message real quick that he was going to die in jail. He just kind of figured that out. He said his contribution to the world was to write a book that or manifesto that would tell the world what happened to him. It was kind of like him trying to figure out what happened, but he was going to share it with the world. Well, in Gramsci's book, he identified that warfare begins with words, and that's the origin of words. Well, with respect to um, the United States of America, words are used strategically to allocate groups, and no different than what Antonio Gramsci identified. They're used to, as a form of warfare. I'm trying to sugarcoat it, but it's just true. So we're going to look at that word. We're going to look at those words. We're going to look at origins. Um, According to Dr. Claude Anderson, now I'm not pulling this out of a rabbit out of a hat. We're going to look at what Claude has to say about Indian. Look at that terminology. Uh, ALN, I'm bringing you up. Did you see the invite? Now, if something should happen to this space, I'm gonna start it over again on my iPhone. This is on kind of like an iPad, but anyway. So the name of Antonio Gramsci's book, in case anybody wanted to know, Gramsci is spelled funny. His name's funny. It's called. It's escaped my mind. That's why I'm looking it up. The Prison Notebook. There it is. So the Prison Notebook is the book he wrote in college. I mean, in college. That's funny. That was a Freudian slip. I called prison college. Oh Lord. But yeah, so we have to look at these words. The best way I can explain Antonio Gramsci's identification of words is words change relationships. I'll tell y'all something very interesting. I taught environmental science and computer science 1 year at a school in Memphis, and I used to be big in planting. Used to plant a lot of stuff. I need to get back to that, get back to my roots, literally and figuratively. But me and my students in environmental science we planted like a thousand sunflowers. They were gorgeous, and we were going to play with the vibration of words. And so we planted about 600 of them in the courtyard. They just made beautiful. We would go see them every day. For lunch, I had the kids go water them and stuff. And we would play music by the sunflowers. Um, we would play classical music, gospel music. The experiment was we were going to play positive music around those sunflowers. They grew big and strong. And I swear to God, they had some type of, this may sound crazy, but they had some type of strange energy emanating off. It was a healing type energy. The kids loved it. All type of insects that I've never seen before, like big old gigantic butterflies. And I mean, the good insects would come and visit the flowers. Well, on the other side of the school, we planted an equal amount of sunflowers by an area where, the designated place where, the kids would meet up to fight, you know what I'm saying? And they grew differently, man. The ones in that area where, they were, smoking dope and blasting rap music and fighting, they grew all weird and sad looking. So what am I saying? Words are important. If you look back at the Shabaka stone, which some argue the Holy Bible, Genesis came from it. The Shabaka stone had says that God or Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, whatever you decide to call the Creator, He said, according to the Shabaka stone, He said, before speech was created, I existed alone, which the supposition is I created speech. So what I'm saying is words are synonymous with creation, right? So what are you talking about, Alon? I'm talking about enemy, the word enemy. If I call you an enemy, I've just created a structure, a relationship in which I can treat you a different way than friend, right? Likewise with friend, that creates a relationship. What type of relationship does a lover create? What type of relationship does a doctor create? A principle, right? Words are very important. So we're going to examine this word Indian. We're going to look at the origins. I'm sure Wani Spots has a lot to say about that. She's done quite a bit of scholarship on it. And well, I'm going to put a cherry on the top with Dr. Claude Anderson. So without further ado, hey, Wani, can you hear me?
Hey, I can. Are you
Yeah, I don't.
speaking on a headphone?
Yeah, I'm
Or
on a. Yeah, and I'm on my little iPad thingy, and I don't know what happened earlier because I'm got full bars and. But anyway, yeah. So could you educate us? Where does this word, this misnomer, Indian, what's the origins according to your scholarship?
that's a very good question. The Greeks used the term Indoi, to refer to people living on the Indian subcontinent. That's the first um, time it was used, and it dates back to like 5th century BCE, and it's found in a lot of the Greek scholars' writings. Um, Remember, India was called Hindustan, just like the
Right?
other areas nearby: Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. So they were a stan, and basically, uh, they just got renamed, whether they liked it or not. They just kept getting referred to like that, similarly to Nigeria. We say this is your name, and since we're colonizing you, we're going to call you this name, and then they just buckle under. Okay, so another thing is they also related to the Indus River is another thing that they were using because They got it from Persian sources, and they would call the area the Indus River, Indus Valley Civilization, so Indus River. And by the time it got through the European languages, it became Indian.
Wow. So the first part of what you told me, I didn't even know. That's interesting. So, what group of people named them Indian?
It's kind of a combination because the Greeks were calling the area Indoi, and then they got the term from the Persians, uh, who referred to
Well,
them as people near the Indus River, and it just came out to be Indian in the end.
that's very interesting, Wani. I kind of figured that the Indian people named themselves, but you're saying it's a result of colonization. That's very fascinating.
And other
Um,
people around them, naming them that are more powerful than themselves.
that's so fascinating because where I was going with today's space is the um the term Indian as applied to um uh, Indigenous Americans was was given the same way. It was given by, you know, what from what I've read by Christoph Colon, or who we refer to as Christopher Columbus, because he got lost. Now, did he get lost? There's some argument on that. I'm not sure if he did. I've read scholarship to show that Christoph Colon was a worked on a ship with with Africans, with Moors rather, and that the Moors would tell him of a land. They would tell him directions and tell him of the land we call America. So it that's a rabbit hole that we can get into if you want to. But the fact of the matter is, Christoph Columbus rather, identified this group of people over here as Indians, which was a misnomer in the first place. Which goes,
Again, I
go
don't,
ahead.
he, even if he wasn't lost, it's pretty common for Europeans to call people that look similar, even though they know. Like, remember, the guy said they were of Ethiopic type when he was over here, um, in the Western Hemisphere. He saw people with brown skin and straight hair. I mean, sorry, brown skin and curly hair or nappy hair, and he said that they were Ethiopic type. He knew he wasn't in Ethiopia, but it's normal for them to relate, uh, those terms to people that they think look like other people. It's not very scientific, but remember, they named, people West Indians, they named people Black Indians, they named, the East Indians, Indians, and they named North American, individuals Indians. So they were running around naming everybody Indians, and they're just not intelligent.
Well, it is a lack of intelligence. However, what I want to identify to the room is it's a display of absolute power. If you look back at the Holy Bible canon, you'll see that Adam, what was Adam's power? He was given power by the Creator, God, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, or whatever you want to refer to the Creator as, Allah. He was given that the power to name. So I want y'all to hear me clearly on this. When you name something in a in not a small way, you are defining it, right? So Adam was given the power to define his reality. So if you look back to Columbus and his associates, in a way, they gave themselves the power to define the reality of a land that had nothing to do with them. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because I'm noticing that movement coming in our amongst our brothers and sisters, where somehow I don't know if it was organic. I don't know if Tariq Nasheed, if it was his leadership. I mean, not, you know, his ideology. I don't know if he thought that up, or I kind of feel like it organically happened. But we took the power of naming ourselves. That's absolute power. Why? It's powerful because we're defining our reality. Now I call myself foundational. What's a foundation? A foundation is essential to the well-being of a structure. And that just excites me that, and I'm gonna say organically, because in all honesty, um, Dr. Claude Anderson was the originator. It was his idea to, and I'm paraphrasing Brother Nasheed, but I watched an interview some time ago where Brother Tariq was talking about, he read that Claude Anderson called us native blacks. And but that it just kind of started with that seed, if you will. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So are FBAs Indian? What do you think about that, Wani?
No. We are indigenous to North America. Enough people have been called Indian, and it's being used. So we're creative to have our own name without being the fifth Indian. So no, uh, no. There's too many Indians, and like I said, there's enough letters in the alphabet and word combinations so that I don't have to reuse old terms. Um, we're indigenous to here. Our genetics were formed here. There's no body with our genetic profile anywhere else on the earth. The moment that you give your DNA to someone and they look at it, they're going to say, oh, that person's not from Africa. That person's not from Europe. That person's not an Inuit. That person is not from South America. And then they're going to see some other things. They're going to say, yeah, this is definitely North America. You
Yeah,
see?
we are totally a new amalgamated group, um, who, for the most part, we're indigenous to the United States of America. I'm going to argue that we were here, and I've said this many times before, here before the red Native American, given their association with the Siberian, with the Asian culture. I was this is kind of like a side point, but I was watching a an interview with Joe Rogan, where Joe Rogan was talking about Genghis Khan. And did you know that Genghis Khan like had a his men? He had a tier of men during his funeral that wouldn't let anybody. Everybody who went to Genghis Khan's funeral had to die. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Well,
No, please
oh,
elaborate.
oh yeah, it's wild as hell. Like Genghis Khan, during his funeral, nobody knows where his body is. I challenge anybody to just look up, say,
Because
where's
they're all
Genghis Khan?
dead? Is that
Yeah,
why?
because yeah, Genghis Khan gave an order to his men, his inner sanctum and outer sanctum. Like basically, his outer sanctum was to murder. His inner sanctum was to murder His outer sanctum was to murder everybody who showed up. Everybody who showed up to the funeral after the funeral procession was supposed to be murdered, and were murdered. And after the outer sanctum murdered everybody who came to his funeral, the inner sanctum of his men murdered the outer sanctum. We don't know where he's buried, but why did I bring that up? I brought that up because Genghis, there's some argument that, and this is kind of controversial, but there's some argument that the red Native American had some attachment and lineage to Genghis Khan's men, which in my view, it makes sense because Genghis Khan, his men were nomadic, and the land bridge theory just says that Asians were following the food source, which back then was the buffalo, and they over time followed the buffalo into North America. Now, why did I bring it up? I brought that up because they have been associated with the term Indian, which is a misnomer, um, and we were here before them. Therefore, um, I'm arguing that we are the indigenous group to the United States of America. This is like our land, which is why I brought up Antonio Gramsci in the beginning, because in my view, these words have been used as warfare to throw us off of our land based birthright identity. Um, because uh, if you trace the genealogy, you'll find out that we were here even before the red natives. Um, I wanted to read something that Dr. Anderson said today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to deal with black labor, white wealth. One of Dr. Claude's most um, exciting books. It's exciting because he has information in it, but he backs it up with graphic organizers and scholarship. I peeled the page off. I should have, I need to go ahead and invest in some, you call those things, the little things that keep the page. Um, but
Page holders,
while I look,
bookmarks.
you bookmarks, yeah, because I'll highlight some and fold the little corner off, but it never really works.
You're dog earing all the books.
Yeah, I just sit around and read. But yeah. So
Put I put something in the jumbotron. Yep, those Aboriginal people that were not of Siberian genetics were here for tens of thousands of years before the people came across the Bering Strait.
and those people are us. We have that blood flowing through our veins. I had an experience. My wife had a distant cousin that passed, and we went to the funeral in the middle of the country. I don't even know the city, but I know it was near Camp Hill, Alabama. Those of you familiar with Alabama is near Auburn, and I I had the dog with us, and she was visiting a great aunt, and I just took the dog for a walk, and I walked past this big old plaque from from President Jackson, that talked about him going to war with the Creeks, the Creek Indians, right? And it talked a little bit about Osceola and blah blah blah, whatever. Well, me and the dog walked past the courthouse. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. Court usually pops off at 9 in most jurisdictions. There was a long line of brown skinned people, um, just a long line. Like they were paying tickets, they were, you know, getting arraignments and whatnot. They were waiting for the courthouse to open. And I looked at their faces and I said, the plaque, it said, I have a picture of it, but it said, I'm paraphrasing now, it said something like the Creek Indians fought General Andrew Jackson and his men and valiantly, and they lost and ended up giving, it used the term white, giving the white man this town, and the Indians had to go into hiding. And I looked at the courthouse of these line of black people lined up to the courthouse, and I said, "These are the Creek Indians right here. We never went anywhere. Just the word game has been used to finesse our land-based right to, I mean, our birthright claim to the land. And that's where words become warfare. Are FBAs Indian? No. However, FBAs are indigenous to the land. Um, we need to keep in mind where the term Indian came from. It was a misnomer provided by Europeans who either A and or B, either A got lost and used it as a mistake because they got lost, or B, we're using it to throw off our land-based identity. Furthermore, the other day I heard Brother Nasheed say something very powerful, which kind of inspired this room on the slick, just to be real. He was talking about how um, these Indian tribes have been finessed by European groups, and how Europeans have kind of infiltrated whole tribes. And I knew that is true because years ago I worked at the Smithsonian. I got a dream job. Some of you know this, some of you don't. I got a dream job at the Smithsonian Institution Museum for the American Indian. I got it when the museum first opened back in 2007. It was brand new. And in my opinion, it's the most beautiful Smithsonian museum, but that's besides the point. But once a week, we would get visited by a Native American chief, or like big deal. Like they would fly out chiefs to come visit the museum, and none of them look like me. None of them looked had our features, and I knew that was wrong because growing up in Alabama, I would meet people who looked like Gucci Mane, who were just full blooded, Choctaw, full blooded Creek, and anyway, I would later learn that what was it called, the Dawes roll? Is that the right term?
Yes.
What could you tell us a little bit? I don't want to speak ignorantly on that. Could you tell us what happened with the Dawes roll, Wani?
They just said that if you want land, go over there and sign up, basically. And it looks like anybody could go. You can see the how much Native American blood the people had because they'll say full-blooded or half-blooded. And some of them will say, I forget what they called it when they weren't Native American at all. I forget what it was, but they had a term for that. Um, yeah, they just basically put their name on it, and that made them eligible to get be on a reservation or have some sort of resource that a lot of people didn't get. Some people got it, some people didn't. A lot of white people did it, along with getting other land opportunities. A lot of this land was pretty rough, and they wanted people to take land and do something with it. So um, not saying that they got some Riviera, but they did get land to start and to grow things and to build a house and to make the best of it. I actually know someone whose family got on some, it was called a settlement. It wasn't the Dawes Rolls, but they went on an Indiana settlement under those circumstances. It was a Irish woman and a Native American, half black man, and they had a whole family, and that turned out to be my best friend's grandparents. So, wait, grandparents? No, great grandparents. Sorry, her great grandparents. That's how they got to Indiana. They had something where they said, "Hey, if you want to go over here, here's a plot of land," and they went over there and they built it up. And
Yeah,
I don't know what the plan was. I don't know whether they got it because she was Irish or because he was Native American, half Native American, and he was half Native American. He had the last name. He had one of their last names.
that's very powerful, and that hits me in a whole different way, Wani, because looking back at history, what I heard you tell us, well, insinuate to, was the um, westward expansion. So, ladies and gentlemen, um, oh, where do I start? So, America, the United States of America, was initially a colony of the British. I know that's a big duh. Y'all can dub me out and hit me with a tomato for that one. Like, yeah, I know, Professor. But so what ended up happening, according to Dr. Howard Zinn, is Native Americans um, who were at war with the British colonists um, would accept runaway enslaved Africans. So basically, some of our ancestors would run away from the plantations. Let's side note, why has there never been a movie that talked about this? But that's beside the point. Would run away from the plantations and keep running, those who survived, until they met with quote unquote Native Americans. Now, the Native Americans would amalgamate with these runaway formerly enslaved people. Now, that right there tells me something. If you immediately amalgamate and marry into a group, you must have a lot of commonality with them, but that's besides the point. What started to happen over time is these Native American and runaway and formerly enslaved blacks formed armies to counterstrike um, to counterstrike uh, the European slave owning class. And over time, these counterstrikes got so intense that the slave owning class, uh, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, basically Benjamin Franklin took the leadership to contact England for help, like just help us. These um, these Indians and former slaves are killing us, you know. And basically, the British nobility reached out to a one Captain Oglethorpe, first name James. Now, there's a university named after him in Atlanta, in Buckhead, called Oglethorpe, that a lot of foundational Black Americans go to. I don't know why they do, but they just tend to go there. But I digress. Oglethorpe came up with a brilliant plan, an evil plan that we're still dealing with today. Oglethorpe's plan was to release out of England the criminal class, the degenerate class. I'm not being pejorative. I'm using words of academic canon. Academic canon called them pedophiles, undesirables. I'm leaving out a word. Um, Debtor, the debtor class. These people were made a deal by the British nobility. The deal was you come to this new colony of America and serve as a buffer between the upper class, rich nobility, and the blacks and Native Americans. Um, this new group of degenerate debtors, words of academic canon, created the state of Georgia. It was called the Georgia Corporation. Now, how does this tie into what I'm talking about? It ties into what I'm talking about because over time, the Georgia Corporation was very successful in backing us down, us being Native Americans and foundational Black Americans, which amalgamated. And Thomas Jefferson, when he became president, made it his business to expand westwardly. And when he expanded westwardly, these new debtor class, degenerate buffer class of Europeans were allowed to take over the land of the natives. So it's kind of frustrating when I hear people talk about land because that land, basically, they were allowed to stake their claim. What that means is um, the debtor class was allowed to write their last name on a like a stake, like a piece of wood with a stake, like like a vampire, like pick a piece of wood, and walk see a piece of land they want and stick it in the ground free of charge. And the judges, I know some of you who went to law school or know a little bit about the law, you hear about the circuits, like California's the Ninth Circuit. Well, that word circuit, it has a old origin. Literally, the judges would get on their buggies with the horses and ride the circuit, ride around Georgia, ride around Alabama, or wherever, and record on parcel the names that own this land, and that those names went and were recorded at courthouse at probate. And basically, what frustrates the living hell out of me is these families still control the land. So if anybody's listening up that has want a reparation claim, and I put this in my book if you want a copy of my book, just you can go to Our Story Publications. It's in my header on X, and put your address. And I got about 200 copies left. I'll send you one. But my claim for reparations is one of my claims for reparations is based on that, based on the fact that these families still own the land that we're buying. We're buying land today in 2024 from people who just inherited. I had a friend, and I know I'm rambling, but I'm gonna shut it down. But I had an associate I went to high school with who, when I was finishing college, his grandmother died. His grandmother died and left a house that was in middle of Birmingham on an acre of land. They sold the house, the estate, for $3 million. That's how beautiful a home it was. And it was just him, his brother, his mom, and her brother. Four people. They split it four ways. And when I found out that the house was passed down from a Georgia corporation, Caucasian, who just staked their claim, that's a claim for reparations, in my pro se opinion, because my grandmother, my great grandmother, was not allowed to buy a house. You want to know why? She was not allowed to buy property because she was property. And in my opinion, I think that needs to be rectified. But I digress. The black. You want to say something, brother?
Um,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you
yes.
now, bro.
How everybody doing? Professor Wani, everybody in the space. It's interesting that you say that, and it reminds me of what you keep on bringing up when it comes down to the creation of Georgia and the purpose of the why Georgia was created, because it was created as a buffer colony between the Carolinas and Florida, because so many slaves or so-called Indians was running towards Florida to liberate themselves. And when you go back and look at, I want to tie this to the Virginia colony law. When you go back and look at that law, it say anybody that comes to America by ship uh is considered a Negro or a slave. And it reminds me of how when the British or the Americans, whatever flag that they was flying, the colonists was flying at the time, the people that they captured became prisoners of war and was labeled anything that they wanted to label. So I just like to keep that in mind, because uh, a lot of us was just shipped from one side of the country to another side of the country, and a lot of us was shipped to the Caribbean and sent back. So it's interesting how when you look at the whole, how yes, it's a possibility. Yeah, we could be Indian, and then it's a possibility that we was just here and just became prisoners of war and just mislabeled every other generation or every other era that occurred. But I land
John Horse.
Hey, what's up, everybody? What's good, Professor? There was something that Professor had said, when he was talking about the amalgamation, of the Native Americans and the slaves and things like that. It kind of took me back to when I like first learned about 1526 rebellion, and that's when I kind of realized, like, everything that I thought that I believed about slavery and our history here, especially me being from South Carolina and stuff like that. Everything that I thought that I knew, I realized that we barely kind of scraped the surface, because once once I started researching more, and just kept looking more into that rebellion during 1526, when the Spanish first came and tried to institute slavery here and tried to get a colony started here. I always tried to figure out, I was like, well, okay, yes, they enslaved the natives. And then, of course, Dr. Claude Anderson, he did speak about that. Um, Dr. Claude Anderson specifically said that you could only be when the Roman Catholic Church instituted slavery, he said that, they instituted it based on skin color. This is the first time in history that any, group of people on the planet instituted slavery in that type of way. So then that kind of raised my antennas, just like, okay, the Spanish here enslaved the native population here. So I'm assuming that these people had to be black, because that's what that's what they said. They said literally out of their mouth, that's the only way that you could be a slave. But then, they had an issue with the native population here, and then they just decided, okay, we're just gonna wipe them out. So then they brought slaves from Spain. But then what blew me away, and I started putting two and two together, once they had the rebellion, I always tried to figure out, how could these two groups come together to overthrow the Spanish and kick the Europeans out of America, quote unquote. But these people spoke two different languages. That always kind of threw me off. And it kind of, just made me put two and two together, that these people knew about each other. You know what I'm saying? This wasn't the first time that they've, had contact with each other. they had to be able to actually communicate with each other and things like that. So it's just, looking at it from that perspective, just kind of made me realize that our history here within this nation is far deeper than what meets the eye.
Can I add to that right quick? Uh,
Yes.
Professor, you remember the other day when I asked you about the difference between the islands and the mainland and the history, and what the brother just said popped that back up in my mind because like he said, the Spanish ended up bringing slaves from Spain, but during the time period that he's talking about, Texas was considered Spain or Hispania. So the I'm trying to see how I can like word this question. If that's the case, and at the same time, the Spanish was taking over so-called Abyssinia, which is what we call Ethiopia now.
Right.
Uh, how do you like separate them lands from each other? Because if Christopher Columbus said when he came to America, he seen people that looked like Ethiopians, and they kicking the Ethiopians out of uh, Spain, and they coming over here.
Wait, they weren't in Spain.
I mean, well, the Iberian Peninsula during the first set of crusades.
Ethiopians?
Yeah, because
Not Moors?
Hmm.
but okay, some things that like some books that I read about that time period, it kind of like use them two names interchangeable. Like Moors are Ethiopians and Ethiopians are Moors. Ethiopian was just a broad term for anybody that was black.
It
So
means burnt skin.
yeah, so I'm trying to like get an understanding on how do you correlate all of these different scenarios and then include the so-called New World. Because if Christopher Columbus was considered a Marrano, and at the same time the Marranos or the crypto Jews or the crypto Christians are getting kicked out of Europe, and all of a sudden they find America. Like how do you kind of like merge those stories? Because we know Christopher Columbus grew up on ships, and he worked for the Portuguese before he became a mariner himself.
Right.
So I'm trying to like trying to see how I can word this question where it is understandable. Because I'm sorry, it's like a lot of thoughts in my head jumping together. Because it it just bring me back to different kind of like story arcs of different parts of the world. But when you try to mend them together and make a cohesive line, straight storyline, it don't match up. It's like, boom, this might be 50 years off, but somehow somebody already over here on this part of the world because somebody is describing it and how they rename places. Like Sister Wanda said, before India was known as Hindustan, and all the rest of them was stand places that they got over the.
Oh yeah. I was telling Wani a month or two ago. I have ancient books. I just have a collection of ancient books. Don't ask how I got them. Well, um, I went like on a mission to get them some time back because I found out that Rockefeller went on a campaign to destroy books of education, books of history, and equally as important, books of medicine. I hadn't figured that out yet, but I got a book, 200-year-old book that you had to be in a club to buy, history book. And in the back of the history book, it has a map of the world. Now, there's a problem with this map. The problem is this map is accurate from above. Italy looks like a high heel shoe. The Middle East, or what Dr. John Henry Clark would call um, Western Asia, looks like a boot. Um, it's just perfectly accurate. So my question is, how in the hell did you know it was shaped that way if you didn't have an airplane? I'm saying this to say they're not telling us everything, ladies and gentlemen. But back to your point, I wanted to kind of land this plane right quick, and we'll move on to Mr. X and then the Tavy. Um, now that Dr. Anderson has established, somebody brought up Dr. Anderson talking about injustice a moment ago. Um, Dr. Anderson in Black Labor, White Wealth says something so brilliant. I want y'all to hear this very well. Dr. Anderson talks about other groups, other ethnic groups, and how everybody got their payment. You know, the Italians got paid for, did y'all know the Italians got paid for lynching? The Japanese got paid for being in camps during World War II. I mean, the Native Americans have reservations. I can go on and on into ad infinitum, but we haven't. Well, Dr. Anderson identifies the problem, and I'm about to read it to you right quick. He uses Indians to identify the problem with us. So, according to Dr. Claude Anderson, he's on page 23 of Black Labor, White Wealth. Dr. Anderson says, quote, the myth of Black progress, stop right there. Myth of Black progress. What does that cover? That talks about that whole Cosby Showism, right? He says the myth of Black progress indicated that Monahan's memoriam encouraged the supplanting of blacks with other ethnic groups, right? Monahan wrote the greater attention to Indians, Mexican Americans, and Puerto Ricans would be useful. The government justified supplanting blacks by promoting the myth that Black Americans were making extraordinary progress. The nation swallowed the myth of Black progress. Meanwhile, real change in Black America's condition never got off the ground. And let me say something right quick. I am honored to be a foundational Black American. I'm in a group that has the greatest amount of achievement known to man, period, with even outside of the circumstances in which we achieved. But what Dr. Anderson wasn't talking about achievement, he was talking about financial perception. So basically, um, the system gaslit the world that Black Americans was doing just fine when financially we were struggling, and that needs to be rectified, ladies and gentlemen. Like Dr. King said, we need to come for that check. Mr. X, what's on your mind?
Peace to everybody in the room. I just wanted to kind of add on to what y'all was saying because I've been diving deeper into this history uh, myself, and it's just crazy. Like it's pretty much um just just common sense. Really, you have the same types of structures that are similar all across the globe. You have pyramids in Egypt, uh, pyramids in Peru. You have Olmec pyramids, and they all use the same type of patterns and like the stones and the steps. They all use technology that we don't even have anymore to lift up 100-ton stones upon top of mega columns. You know what I'm saying? Um, so it just shows that the world was interconnected, and it was interconnected by people who had a common source of knowledge. Um, you have mounds in Mississippi. Um, you have the snake mounds in Ohio. These are, um, I guess, Egyptian like spiritual spiritual stories or characters. Like the primordial mounds is like something that's talked about in like ancient Egypt. The snake mounds in
Brother, let me stop you right there because you said something that I've never heard anybody say on Spaces that I'm doing research on right now. The brother said snake mounds in Ohio. Anybody heard of that? Well, there are,
Snake mound, yes.
oh yeah. Well, north of that snake mound, which is perfectly shaped, I don't think it's a snake, brother. I think it's a sperm. It looks like a sperm going into an egg
You
from
mean serpent mound?
serpent mound. That's it.
yeah, the ones in Ohio made by the I think the
They
tribe start
don't
with
know.
an A.
They
They
don't
don't
know who
know.
made it. They
Yeah.
just they guess a lot. I'm serious. There's a lot of stuff they said that's Incan, and then their Incan people are like, we came after that. And so now they're just calling things pre-Inca and pre-Mississippian, and they can't really prove who made it, which is very interesting, isn't it?
I have a document that talks about the serpent mounds, and it basically says an hour. I'm sorry, not an hour. A couple miles north of the serpent mounds, northeast, I think, there is a gigantic crater. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is, like the brother X just said, and like the brother X just implied, there was a sophisticated, I want y'all to hear me well on this. There was a sophisticated civilization here in North America 10,000, actually over 11,000 years ago, because 11,000 years, archaeologists have um, identified was a young Dryas event, whatever that was. Well, just shy of a couple miles, several miles north. I can't remember if it was 2 or like 4 miles. You can kind of Google it. North of the Serpent Mounds is a gigantic crater that would insinuate there was some type of outrageous energy release near those mounds. So what am I saying? Could it have been a young Dryas that wiped us out? Were we on in what is now North America, living a very advanced, sophisticated, civilized life, and um, comets or meteors from the younger Dryas wiped us out? Or was it some type of galactic war as identified by Edgar Casey? But we'll talk about that a little later on. Brother X, go ahead and land your plane. I'm so glad you brought up the Serpent Mound.
Okay, yeah, man. I just wanted to say like it's so much evidence that we were all around the world before white people even thought about slave ships. The the African king on the West African king Abubakar, he has documents going back and forth to the Americas trading. Um, we have we got pyramids all the way in Antarctica. You know what I'm saying? So. Um, that's pretty much the point that I wanted to make. And I also wanted to ask Wani a question since like you're an anthropologist, right, Wani?
Yes.
I wanted to ask. So I was looking up Luja, right? And they said she had a Negroid skull. Um,
Yes.
and have you heard like they burnt the
Yeah,
museum,
they burned the museum down.
and
Nice.
now they're trying to say that you know what I'm saying, they did a
He's
DNA
white
test on her,
now.
and they're trying to say she's Amerindian now. So I was trying to see
Hmm.
like, what did you think about that? Do you have like the actual DNA? Because I couldn't find the actual DNA test anywhere. Like they don't have them anywhere, so that you can actually look yourself. So I just wanted to know what you thought of that and kind of your take on like the haplogroups and stuff like that. Peace.
Yeah, I didn't see what they said that the haplogroup is, but this is one of the issues. When they find a skull that's 20 or 30,000 years old, it's not going to be a white person. It's not going to be any of these people because those features didn't exist. So they're going to pull up, they're going to say, oh, it's a Negro. The first batch of scientists are going to say, oh, this is a Negroid, or this has, these types of features. They're going to say that first, and then the next wave will come along and try to erase it. Like, why did you guys say it to begin with? They have to say the truth. We can see the skull. I don't need to examine it in my hands. I can look at the nose openings and see what's going on to some extent. So, yeah, they're black. They look like black people. If you were to run up on them, you would think that they were black and they were here. That's not disputed. They're not going to lie about that part. But when they further go and they say, oh, well, this is an Amerindian and this is this and the other thing, I don't know what they're talking about. They're just assigning whatever DNA to whatever, and giving it names that they want it to have, but it's still going to end up being the same. Just like the Grimaldi, they can give it all kinds of Italian names. It's still a Khoisan skull in Southern Europe, and there's nothing they can do about it. They've already examined it. It's a Negroid skull. It's in Europe. That was the first inkling that people knew, hey, wait a minute. All of these black skulls are popping up all over Europe. Yeah, because they didn't exist. When they just recently showed they said the first Swedes, which they're not the first either, but whatever, first Swedes, and they show a dark-skinned, blue-eyed person. Um, the white people were outraged. They feel like that's wokeism. They really believe that their skin color and their straight hair has been here the whole time. But I assure you that when people that we now consider white migrated from the Caspian steppe and from the steppe region, that was just a few thousand years ago. When you compare it to, they ran into people. When they went to Sweden, they there were people there. When they went to Southern Europe, Italy or France or Spain, Portugal, people were there. People were in Iberia, and they don't have anything to do with the migration from the steppe region. So that's a whole nother group of people doing a whole nother migration. A lot of the people that you see in Southern Europe, they went directly from Africa to Southern Europe. They did not go to Central Asia. They did not go to the steppe region. And it's thought that the reason they ended up in Eurasia in the steppe region was because just going straight from Africa to Southern Europe was impossible because of some sort of weather or obstructions, or I'm still trying to work that out
Wasn't
because
it
that's a
because of the
very good
desert?
question. It was something about the it not being habitable or passable. Maybe even an ice sheet. I don't know. But whatever the reason, a lot of people ended up in that steppe region. You've got the Mongol hordes running around. You've got the Huns running around. You've got all of these guys on horseback blurring the line between Caucasian and Asian up there. And then finally, these guys decide to move south for better climates and whatever, and it's open. They can do it now. There's no weather problems. They can actually live in Sweden and places like that, where those places were not, you couldn't go there. It wasn't possible to live there when they first started coming out of Africa. So, like I said, when they got there, there were people there, and they just amalgamated in with them. So the notion of purity is non-existent. But back to your original question, the woman is would be looked at as a if a explorer saw her, he would say Luzia is a black woman. Just like if I go over to Fiji, I'm going to say, look at all these afros. If I go over to Papua New Guinea, I'm going to say, look at all these. This guy looks like my uncle over here. And they're going to have a range of colors. They're going to look just like people you know. And they don't have a DNA profile anything like ours. Their DNA profile is classified as Asian or Austro Melanesian or whatever name they want to give it. It's not classified as African. So that just gives you an idea of the classifications and whatever they want to make out of them.
I wanted to expand upon what Wani was saying because I want people to understand that haplogroups are irrelevant when it comes to us anyway. Because, like Wani said once before, the bones never changed. The bones aren't changing. So the bones are black, they're black, right? At least morphologically, right? So, three things here when we're talking about our indigeneity: archaeology, bones, like Wani was talking about, then there's sociology, and then there's genealogy or genetics. And one more thing too, when they're examining these bones, they're so old to the point where a lot of them are just lying because a lot of the DNA is coming back damaged. They said the same thing about Kennewick Man. If you look up Kennewick Man, they lied about that. The DNA came back damaged. They never fully examined it, and they came up with their own conclusions. They were actually even sued for it
Well,
because they were lying, trying to protect.
speaking of the lie, brother, if I may interject,
Hmm.
um,
Go ahead.
one after studying an official academic canon, one starts to question the motives of academic canon with respect to history, archaeology, and anthropology. When I was a youngster, I used to think it was to discover the truth and find out what history is all about. But at this point in my career, I'm all but convinced that it's designed to either A, create a false narrative, or B, hide something from us. The reoccurring theme that y'all keep bringing up is lies, right? Well, there's a temple in Egypt called the Temple of Seti One. I like saying that. It's set at SETI, number one, Seti One, Seti One. Well, in the 20s, at 1920s, that's an interesting time. The Rockefeller went on escapade of just changing history, along with Andrew Carnegie and the usual suspect. Well, the Temple of Seti One used to have a mural, I mean, a meta netter, what the European calls hieroglyphics, that identified the origin of different groups of man. They have the Tamahu, which was the European, and they had the mixed man. They had the Egyptian, which was jet black, the Kemite. But anyway, my point is, in the middle of the desert in the 1920s, um, the Temple of Seti One flooded. How does it flood in the middle of the desert? And and that mural, I mean, I want to call it a mural, but the metal netter was lost forever. Sheikh Anta Diop has a picture of it in one of his books. He could snap a quick picture. But my point is, I'm gonna let the brother land his plane. Is you got to take Western academic, archaeological, historical, and anthropological canon with a grain of salt. But continue. I love your cook.
No, absolutely. Because they intentionally flooded Aswan. They, for all intents and purposes, could have saved. Did that on purpose, and they decided to move certain things closer up, lower Egypt, which would be north of Egypt, closer to where a lot of the invaders have come into contact. But to the other point, yeah, Kennewick Man was false. If you want to look that up, see if I'm lying. It's in the replies. If you go to NCBI or a lot of these data places where they keep a lot of this information, go to the citations. Look at the replies. They'll tell you that the DNA they did on Kennewick Man, for example, never came back. Amerindian, Amarin Indian,
Amerindian,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah, it never came back that that was falsified, and it was lied to preserve the ideology of the native tribes.
Yes,
Um,
that's a big thing politically now.
yep,
Go ahead, sorry.
yep. They absolutely finished. They did conclude with that in that suit. Um, so like Wani said again, the bones aren't changing. The bones of Lucia, she was not alone. She was just the oldest. Her skull pattern persisted. They even said that. So she's not alone. It persisted for many years on end. They found even I think the earliest one they found was probably in the 1300s. I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it continued well into um, um, into colonialism, we know that for a fact as well because of the testimonies and the witnesses. But besides archaeology, we're going into sociology. I'm gonna keep this quick. Sociology, again, these tribes, we don't need replication from any of these tribes. I've mentioned this in Tariq Spaces. We're our own distinct tribe. There's 1,000 different Native American tribes. If we when we were here as well, we had our own distinct tribe. We're not the same as Native Americans. We don't need red Native Americans and their replication of their culture to codify us as existing here. We're it's totally different cultures, right? So we're talking about sociology and tribes, there was no blood quantums in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, right? There was just acceptance. If they accepted you into the tribe, that's just what it was. You were a part of the tribe. So, irregardless of that, then we go into genetics. We are a highly admixed population. We are a highly admixed group. With that being said, with every passing generation, our oldest DNA gets shorter and shorter and harder to find, to the point where they have even said in NCBI that the origin of the Black American is there is no origin. We don't have a definitive origin because we are so highly admixed. There is not one definitive or not even one real study on Black Americans in correlation to aDNA. aDNA being ancient DNA. We don't. There isn't one study on us that could codify and say that we were African or West African or Nigerian or what have you. So I need to make sure that's clear and understood. And with that, yeah, I made myself clear. I learned.
Who is cooking in here tonight, y'all?
Now,
Yes, it is.
speaking of lying out of your butt, that Piltdown man was yet another scandal. And they tried to get out of it. They're like, oh, the scientists didn't say that. It was some guy. But you went along with it and tried to say that white people were the center of all creation. They've been trying to say this for the longest time. They are so far away from being the original. They're the last. They're the last because we can see that Asians formed their facial features and their dental patterns and way before white people. Now, one thing that's interesting is that you didn't hear any explorers say they saw negritos over here. So I'm guessing that the people that sailed over here were from Australia. They were full sized individuals, not small statured individuals. But I do think that there's a possibility that negritos could have been here earlier, but I don't really see that in any kind of sculptures or um, people seeing things. Only that black Indian, that mysterious black Indian who we now know is Australoid and things like that. But I don't think those Negritos are highly represented here. But I know they were here because they were everywhere. And again, we're talking about tens of thousands of years of people being in a certain area, and they people get curious, and they say, "Hey, well, we went to these Pacific Islands. What's over there?" You see, that's what Aboriginal people did. That's what Native Australians did. They were in Australia, and then they just said, hey, let's go over to these other islands. And they slowly populated those islands. But also, so did the Negritos. So that's I guess the Negritos didn't further go over because we don't see they're very small statured, and that would pop up. We do have some very small statured people in South America, though. Remember, they were measuring them. They're like, whoa, I mean, they have some very, very small people. So I think they did get here, but primarily I think the full statured people got here of that background. They're both of a similar background. Not the same migration, but Negritos and Australian natives have a lot of similarities. They also have the Denisovan and Neanderthal admixtures. They both spent time in Central Asia, which gave them those admixtures and moved along. So they have things in common.
And the only reason we even see in these genetic tests Nigerian or whatever else you see is because of the fact that these are all very recent DNA admixtures. So we have to take into account that yeah, the slave trade happened, and you know, and it was a part of our admixture most recently. So we're only looking within the past, maybe I think they said about 200 years.
Yes. It's funny, they do say 200 years and then something from the 1500s will pop up. You can do that ancient DNA test that tells you some other things, but basically, our genetics are all over the place, and that's become uh, the ethnicity is that there's a whole lot of things going on. But when you look at it, everybody has a whole lot of things going on, but it's just that ours is very modern. It's a modern, um, it's a modern mixture that we've done up here. It's a modern ethnogenesis where the older ones, like the, white people, yeah, they're all mixed up. They got Asians going on in there. Everywhere they move, they picked up something. They have genetics from Africa, North Africa, and they're from Africa ultimately. So everybody is mixed, but we're speaking about recent mixtures.
Recent mixtures, and then these S&Ps also are very they try to say that you can find your ethnicity within these S&Ps, but if that was the case, we'd be matching with ourselves because no one has our S&Ps like each other. So I think a lot of that is a bit of a grift as well. Our S&Ps aren't matching with Nigeria like that. Matter of fact, they are overly represented in these DNA tests, and they've admitted it as well. You can go into X if you want.
Yes, they are highly represented, and nobody's trying to be related to them like that. Go ahead. They're all over the place. Just turn on the TV. It is just like an explosion of Nigerians all over the place. We're related to them. They're the face of us. They're climbing all over me, and I need a break.
But if I passed away and they buried me next to a Nigerian person, wouldn't they be able to tell the difference with our skulls, Wani?
Yes. Want me to post it?
Yes.
I'll post it.
So, I just want to ask this one last question, and I land. Um, how do you guys feel about DNA tests, and how should we use them, or how should we view them? Peace.
That's a good question. I have taken multiple DNA tests. One of them was National Geographic's Genome Project. Another one was with, it was for a family last name that was doing a project. And I've also looked at a lot of studies on Black Americans. There was a study in South America on us. So it the tests that I've taken with 23andMe, uh, they are similar to these professional tests. The whole genome test, they're similar, but they're not as sensitive. So they give you a good idea, but don't be shocked if you have Native American DNA and it doesn't show up, because I know people that live on a reservation and they are Native American and it doesn't show up on there. It just says they're black and white. And that's because genetic profile is not highly represented. So it's just that's one of the drawbacks. The profiles that are not highly represented don't show up. So you're not going to see Austronesian that much. You still see it. I still see it. It's kind of grouped with Native Americans on it. It's very popular among Black Americans, but It could occur three ways. It could occur because of that ancient ancestor. It could occur because there were 17 slave ships from Madagascar, and those people had that Austronesian DNA. Oh, another way, it could occur because we have nomads in our genetics, and it also could occur because there's a thing called the Manila Men. Manila Men were uh, they came over and they were fishing. They were like fishermen in Louisiana, and they were Roman Catholics, and they married a lot of women. Excuse me, they married a lot of women in Louisiana, but those women didn't want to hang out with fishermen. Apparently, they just wanted to have sex. So, and be married. So they took those babies, all of those children that were partially Filipino, their genetics show up as um, Austronesian. So this Austronesian, uh, we can't pinpoint where it's coming from because of all of those opportunities for that to be there. Okay, go ahead, MF Kush.
Hey y'all, y'all all smell good tonight. I just want to let y'all know y'all smell like paid bills, good credit, and I love how everybody brush their teeth and comb their hair. Now, I have a question for the host and the two co-hosts. When it comes to us talking about our genealogy, right? And people keep using this damn 23andMe shit. Why do y'all think people ignore the fact that on those little things it says this is for entertainment purposes only?
I wouldn't consider it entertainment purposes because it does give you a good idea, but it's just not, you know, it's not as good as a whole genome test, which you can
They
buy.
they don't want to get sued.
Right. But it does give you
That
a
that's
general idea.
that's exactly what I was going to say. That's a slick legal disclaimer, just in case it goes to court. They can say, "Oh, this is for entertainment."
Well, because
It's a,
people keep using that one clip of where like this white dude did one of those 23andMe's on his parrot, right? And it said that the parrot was like 23% from the Congo, that kind of shit. So that's the reason why I was asking. But I think what's really important is that when we talk about who we are and where we come from, people really need to understand that part. Like, nigga, we are everything. We've invented everything. We taught people how to even basically wash their own butts. Okay, we've made creations that have damn near went global, and so when we talk about whether Black Americans could be Indian, I mean, to ignore the fact that there are Black Americans that have indigenous root is like it's like you being disrespectful to your entire lineage. You know what I'm saying? To an extent.
Yep, we have indigenous uh, genetics. Not only that, we walked on the Trail of Tears and have a great deal of admixture from close proximity sex with Native Americans. Even people that weren't on the reservation um, have admixtures. You have a lot of white people running around with admixtures, especially people in Texas and Oklahoma. So yeah, we have admixtures with all the indigenous people here. Anyone else?
Thank you for answering my
Were,
question.
were, were you done, MF Kush? You can stay up here and keep talking. Are you
Oh,
done?
oh no! Listen, I'm sitting in the room with the teachers. I'm learning, so I'm gonna let y'all do what y'all think. That's all I had to say.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm not sure why people want to ignore our genetics other than they just, they just have a problem with it by the way that this is us, okay? We're having these problems because we set the standard. We said we're black and don't pay attention to that admixture. I don't care if the person is nearly white, they're black. I don't care if the person is pitch black, they're black. Don't talk to us about admixtures. We don't want to talk about it. That was our position for years. We don't have any admixture. What are you talking about? You can't prove it. There's no DNA. We did not admit to that. And everyone went along. The Africans said, yes, they're pure African. We're not going to discuss the admixture. But now, because of us being in a more honest state of mind, probably because people got their DNA tests back, uh, a lot of DNA things have happened to just kind of let us know, yeah, we are all those things, but we don't identify like the, Cubans do or like Dominicans do. We have the same range as they do, but we don't identify as English. They identify as Spanish, and we don't have as much colonial brain damage. We have a very strong identity, and we take it with us wherever we go. Okay, Kinetic, I see that white thumb down. What's going
That's
on? Did I, first of all, every time I say Hispanic or Latino or Dominican, you get mad. What's the problem?
Like brain damage. I don't like that term, and you always start.
You
You
don't like
always
brain damage? Well,
no
stop
no.
having it.
You try to accuse us of having brain damage, but
You do.
we all have the same amount of brain damage because we all been
No, we
colonized.
don't. No, we don't. We don't call
with
ourselves
with
English.
with
You,
brain damage comes brain swelling, and you all have swollen heads. So she's correct.
we have
Money,
less.
this is disingenuous. Like I told you, I did my
We have
research on
less.
you. I've
Oh
done my
Lord,
research on
here
you, and
we
I know
go.
the reason why you feel the way you feel, and it's disingenuous.
It's not disingenuous. I already agreed. I was pissed off and remained pissed off permanently. Any other questions?
I'm gonna yield the mic. I'm going.
You're a boring
Oh, thank
troll.
you,
You
cause
could do better than that.
I couldn't deal with that.
You know what?
Like, Lord, not today.
You know what? But see, that right there is the point. That's why it's important to have conversations like this because you constantly got people who won't even sit up here and stay in their own homeland to fix their own economic situation, but sit up here all day and talk about where Black Americans come from, what Black Americans got going on, and how we talk about our indigenous roots. But y'all are so damn tribalistic that y'all literally y'all stone people to death in 2024. There's nothing y'all have to say. And y'all gonna get mad when it comes January 20th when all of y'all get deported. We know who we are as a people. There's one thing you would never there's one of the very many things you will never take away from Black Americans, and that is our identity. Our identity will has always been the basis of anybody else even wanting to even have the conversation of genealogy. Our history is the most unique thing ever. And had our ancestors not did the stuff you did, y'all still, like y'all still doing right now, would be still shitting in a hole in 2024. Y'all would still over here be practicing in child marriages in 2024. Matter of fact, y'all would still be over here cutting off body parts and putting them in holding them as trophies had it not been for Black Americans. If everything that y'all do is on the basis of everything we had already started, y'all now just catching on. So I land there. Sorry, I had to come up and address that shit. I don't like that shit.
That's right.
Like instead of you coming up in here thumbs down, and you can go figure out how to go start a church in your country. You can go figure out how to teach children how to read. You'd be able to actually be able to set up some kind of form of government that would better fit your people. But y'all got all day to come up in here and talk about Black Americans and everything else. Y'all got so much time and energy that you will come up in a room full of a constructive conversation just to disrupt, just so you can get some airtime to be on a recording. You need to go find something to do with your day. Soap and water obviously is not it.
I can't even
Yep.
tell where he's from because he puts his thumb down every time I say something about Latinos. Okay, can you tell us where you're
I,
from, Mr.
I think
Troll?
Tariq figured it out. I think Tariq said that he was Latino pretending to be. I don't know, but Tariq said that he's completely different than what his fake picture
Okay,
looks like.
Remember, he said
because
he
he's
was
got a
Cuban last time.
list. Okay, because he has a list that's out of this world. And
Regardless, he don't become relevant unless we make him relevant. That's what he don't get.
right. Are you Spanish, sir?
Um, I wanted.
Very.
Come on, let's get back to what we were doing. I just wanted to repeat something for the room. The first time the term Indian was used was around the 5th century when Greek people used to uh, refer to the Indian subcontinent. So they would call it Indoi, Indoi. And then they started to, the Persians would call it, something Indy something, and it was like something about the Indus River. They would call them that. And then the European just, kept fooling around with the name until it became Indian. They were called Hindustan, like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and all the other stands. Um, and they just accepted the term Indian, and being colonized didn't help. So that's what we were talking about. And then later they called people in the Caribbean West Indians. They called people they saw over here Black Indians. They called um, Native Americans Indians. So they've been running around calling anyone Indians that they felt like looked a certain way. Okay, go ahead, K.I.O.T.
Hey everybody. It's Coyote.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I don't want to distract. First, I want to say thank you for letting me on the stage. And hi to the room. But since we're talking about like I guess the makeup of us, what I can say is that I've seen a lot of repeated. I don't know if you guys already discussed this, but like repeated like facial features amongst us, and also like what's most observant to me when I was little is I would always see a lot of people with like golden hair, orange hair, or red hair. And usually there will be like maybe one or two people in each family group that would have that. I know I have like someone in my family, a couple people that have like kind of orangey kind of hair. And I wasn't sure if that was part of like an Indian trait or not. And I also heard that Choctaws, I think, have certain features when they would describe certain Indian groups. They would say they have like raccoon-like eyes. And knowing that my grandmother's family came from like Louisiana, um, they were so-called Choctaw, word of mouth. And she actually has those features. Like she has like kind of the pop eyes with the dark rings around it. And a lot of the family on her side, they all look like that. So I wasn't sure if you all knew any information regarding like certain features that we had.
That hair color you're describing, a rainy, they used to call it a rainy hair color, is an unattractive reddish and yellowish hair color. I'm not sure where that comes from. It could just come from being admixed with Europeans. Some of them have red hair, so that could come out. Or it could be just a combination of a lot of different things. Who's next?
Thank you.
Any other questions? You asked something else, but no, I'm not sure of the poppy eyes you were speaking of. I'm not sure about that feature.
Yeah, I through the family, I've noticed the feature, and I've also seen it in certain documentaries where they would like kind of describe how some of the tribes look in certain areas. So that's why I got, those two maybe connected, made a connection there.
Go ahead, Xander.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. When you speak of, it says our FBAs Indian. If you look at the original, if you're talking about the original Indians, yes, black. If you go to any continent on the planet, the original people were black. And what I've seen is that Like I remember I'd be in spaces like maybe a year ago, and I hear people arguing back and forth. Like some people claim to be secure the tribe, and some will claim to be Indian. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are you arguing about? Because if you go to the original, yes, they were all Black Americans, and if you look at our history, it's you can any one of us in this room, if you're a Black American, you can go back and say, yeah, I have some Indian in my blood somewhere. When really it is Black that you have in your. It's the Indians that have Black. 23 and Me, because too often, if you think about, they'll say, well, you're this much European. Well, when does this test start? Like, what year does it determine when a European started? Because, like I say, if you go back to the earliest Europeans, just like with with that Cheddar man, that person is Black. So I'm all for looking, tracing your lineage like the 1870 census to see if you originated from slavery in this country. But I've never really found a solid enough evidence to buy too much into the 23andMe. Oh, well, you're this much Scandinavian, this much Czechoslovakian. Because, like I said, if you go to the original anywhere, they were all Black. I'm mute.
Yes, it doesn't go back far enough. And then we're fighting a political issue. They know that the Aboriginal type individuals were here. I posted it in the Jumbotron. They know that. But the Native Americans made quite a stink, and they said, we're going to go into anthropology and archaeology so we can keep the narrative, so we can stop this dangerous narrative. So they've literally said that we're going to stop you from saying that people were here before us. Of course, people were here before them. They just came over here. They came over here. The Navajos came over here between 900 BC. No, sorry, 900 BC. Wait, CE. I didn't want to say after Christ. Uh, and 1500s. They came over here after the Vikings, and they were classified as Native
Facts.
Americans. How? They're Siberian. They still speak a language related to people on the Bering Strait. They just got called Native Americans because guess what? White people mislabeled them wrong again. They're Siberians. And they ran up into people that were here. And those people are Austronesian. Well, I'll call them Proto Austronesian. They keep changing the name, but you know who they are.
Melanesian.
Right. You know who they are. The same people that you will find in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. That's who they are.
They're us.
Okay,
Look at my picture.
Kemetic, what's the problem now? You're thumbing down, you're making a lot of gestures.
No, no, I'm
What's
just saying anything but Africa, anything but claiming, your true roots.
It's not claiming anything. I've already said I had 38 African countries listed on my genetic profile. Why so many? Because all four of my grandparents came from different parts of America: Virginia, South Carolina, um, you know, um, so North Carolina to Philadelphia, Kentucky going to Ohio, South Carolina going to Ohio. See, they came from so many places that they picked up different groups in their genetics along the way. So there's a whole lot of things going on because of that. A lot of people, both their parents come from the same area and their grandparents do. That's not my case. So I have
Well,
lots of Africans jumping around in my genetics. What's the
well,
problem?
Wani, what I'm hearing from the gentleman, and I hear it from a lot of his type, is just a whole lot of insecurity. You don't hear Chinese yelling at Native Americans saying, "You're Asian. What about your Asian history?" I mean, this is just an outrageous amount of insecurity, you know. Furthermore,
Yes.
furthermore, given the fact that most scholars agree that landmass used to be one, the Pangea theory, we don't know where we're from. You know what I'm saying? So actually that's really sad. What is he gonna get out of this if we say, yeah, you know what? We're all from Ghana. What is he gonna get out of that? Some
Let
gratification?
let him tell us. Can you articulate why you need for us to prioritize Africa if we have other things going on that we want to view ourselves as one, as not just one part, but one group that we are, like everyone else in the planet does. You don't see white people talking about I'm a Caspian Steppian, you know, they're what they are now. So why do you want us to not only claim something that we're not fully, but like we have other things going on and you want us to just prioritize that because you're spoiled, because we were running around in dashikis and kufis and you thought you had it like that. But
Or
now we're not doing that and you're mad. Go ahead and tell us about it.
No, no, it's because the reason why in New York, we've always been pan-Africanists. We've always looked up to
Okay.
Africa. A
Look
tribe
up
called
to it
Quest.
how? Why would I look up to Africa? Please give me something that Africans are doing that I should admire.
Egypt, Egypt though, where they build the pyramids, and
Uh, uh,
also
little
no,
boy,
they didn't. No, no, no.
keep your little ass in the West.
Yep, West Africa, my friend.
You didn't build any pyramid. I'm about to curse. Okay, get ready. Now your ass is gonna tell me what I need to look up to in West Africa.
yeah, yeah, I can tell you a lot about the Mali Empire,
Go
Mansa
ahead and
Musa.
oh, you're gonna tell me that I should look up to a slave trader with a lot of gold. Okay, continue.
Also the most successful immigrant to this country are
Oh,
Nigerians. They
here we
come here.
go. That's been debunked, and it was an article written by you.
It's not
You
true.
you just deliver our foods and drive us around. Now, back to what, why should I look up to you? We created 101 HBCUs in this country, and you want us to look up to you because you drug your raggedy butt over here to go to one and got a job after being trained by Black American doctors?
Hello.
You're a charity case. So I should look up to West Africans because of what?
Zulu Nation, brothers that's
Oh
created.
my goodness.
You know
That
that tribe
th-
called Quest, and we've always had a Pan-Africanist
You can't
culture.
even talk. Why would I look up to you?
You make fun of my accent, but you speak like a
That's
white
not an
lady, Wani.
That's
accent.
not even your
That's not
real
an accent.
accent. Yeah, that's not even a real accent. Quit playing with us.
You have a series of speech impediments and fake accents, and it's annoying. But continue.
The xenophobia that you
I
guys are
thought it was just a
displaying.
lot of zestiness.
I'm not xenophobic. I just don't like you, and I have no good reason.
You're
it,
highly xenophobic, and Pan-Africanism.
it's really interesting that when we're talking about our lineage, we're talking about us. This is what did Sly Stone say? This is a family affair. And he coming up in here, inserting himself in it, trying to tell us who we are. This is embarrassing.
Because it's a step back, it's regressive to what we're used to. We're
So,
Pan-Africanists. Our
have
culture.
you, hold on. Have you said our culture? You're not in my culture, but okay. Have you ever heard a Chinese person begging and crying on the stage trying to force an Inuit person or a Native American person to identify as Asian? They're Asian. Why are you trying to force us to identify as something? What's the problem? It looks like a case of very low self esteem. You can't stand on your own. Why not? Stand on your own. You don't need to include us. You have 1.3 billion, uh, whatever they are, individuals.
Well,
Okay?
when the white super when the cops stop us, they don't see nationality. They see color first. They don't care about your
Mhm.
nationality. They don't care about
So
your.
our ethnicity should be based on cop stops? What sense does that make?
No, no, but we're the same people when
No,
they
we're
view
not.
us.
No, we're not the same people. You're saying that white people have determined we're the same people, and you're going with that because you have a pea brain?
No, what I'm saying is, black people, we at the bottom, and no matter what continent we go to, Africa has
Yeah,
54
you know what's
countries.
funny? You're at the bottom in Africa. Africa's the bottom, and you're at the bottom in it. How does that work?
Well, we're Africans in the United States, and we're on the bottom here. We're bottom caste,
I'm
worldwide in
not
Europe.
African. You are whatever you are. I don't even know what you are. You're a person with a speech impediment, so you're going to be on the bottom. That's true.
You know the ad
You're.
hominems are not necessary. I'm just here
I
to.
like doing ad
I,
hominems
I
though.
got I
It's
got rid
fun.
of him. He's lowering the IQ of my stage. We're having a high level
That was the
conversation.
longest you were able. I normally you get rid of them quicker than that, Professor. Good for
I was
you.
trying to give him. I kind of felt sorry for him. I was gonna give him more time to talk, but he kept saying "we," and
He
I'm
was
like, man,
talking.
If we're going back to scholarship, I would like to add something because
Yes, please do.
if we are going to talk about admixture, I mean, I think it's quite evident we've been here too long to not have admixture, but we also don't need to rely on that because there's no rule that states that. First of all, Native Americans, they have the lowest genetic diversity, I believe, right? Um, and we do have their SNPs. Um, and their genetics and admixture. But the thing is also, we take into account simply because of the fact that when we're talking about these genetics, Native Americans they went through a founders event, and people might question what's a founders event. A founders event when a small number of ancestral individuals give rise to a large fraction of the population, often because of war, famine, or disease, is drastically reduced the population um, and or genetic isolation. Um, there's no rule that says you need to go through a founders event to cause a mutation in order for you to be indigenous to a landmass. We simply, sorry, who's that?
who that
Somebody
is?
talking?
Somebody need to mute themselves. Go ahead, brother. Keep
Oh,
carry
okay.
on.
Um, yeah, so we don't need to go through a genetic mutation in order to be indigenous to a landmass. There's no rule that says that. We simply are a group that didn't go through a founders event. We stayed whole, and we are a group that continued to populate. So that's irregardless of any type of admixture. If we were found where we were just indigenous where we were found.
Yeah, I think it's as I've opened with this space, it's warfare. It's a smoking gun. We were here. We're indigenous to the land, and the powers that be are trying to gaslight the whole world like we're visitors. It's the only thing that makes sense. You're giving everybody reparations but us. You're letting everybody identify themselves but us. That's like almost telling on the plan, Keep them away from figuring out who they are. The black, what's on your mind?
Uh, I like what the brother said, because if the so-called founders event is allocated towards a group that's been isolated or had been separated, then how much admixture would we have when we know that it was laws on the books to not mix with us? That was against the law. So those admixtures will probably be few more than many.
No,
In
there's a
in
lot.
in the,
Let
I
me
mean, yeah,
let me explain why. 60% of women on plantations were raped. Um, And then their children admixed, I mean, their children had children with people on the plantation. They could be pure African or white, depending, and anything in between. But we had something called close proximity sex. Okay. So
Yeah.
lots of us lived outside of the plantation. Remember, free people of color? Those people lived outside. We had people that ran away from slavery. So, really big populations forming on these triracial isolates, which were really quadracial, but we'll say triracial because that's the more popular term. On those triracial isolates, there were different types of Europeans like Swedish, Dutch. A lot of people went up to the Appalachian area with Norwegian and other Northern European women. So we did a lot of admixing. We created tons and tons and tons of triracial isolates on this land. Now, when those people that came off the plantation got out of slavery, they blended in with these other people that were from triracial isolates because they could now stop being isolated and go into, cities. They didn't have to hide out anymore because all people that were black had to kind of keep a low profile. Even Europeans were hiding from English people because English people were hostile. So these triracial isolates were really helpful for everybody to stay out of Dodge. So yeah, Pete, we're pretty mixed. It's not about being light. Just remember that. You could be dark skinned with a different type of nose or wavy hair. It just comes out all different kinds of ways. Um, so that's us.
So is that kind of like the reason why at one point of time America was trying to come up with different terminology for the admixtures?
Yes,
Like,
they were
okay,
calling us colored, which addresses the admixture like it does in South Africa. They tried to do something like create a caste system like mulatto and things, and ultimately we rejected that. It took hold a little bit in Louisiana, but collectively we just didn't do that. We just said we're all black, and we didn't try to divide ourselves.
okay, because my granny she used to live in Louisiana growing up, and she used to tell me about the little quadroon balls that her sister used to go to, because she said she didn't like going to them. She went to one, but she said she didn't like going to them. But it reminds me of, because Louisiana and some of Texas history is very weird and unique because of all the admixtures and how people stay isolated in their own little factions. So what you said, it made me think about a lot.
Yeah, they tried to do the octoroon and the quadroon, and those things didn't take hold, mostly because black women kept having sex with dark skinned men. And we kept making ourselves brown and brown and brown, which is different than our South American and Caribbean counterparts who think that it's better to improve the race by marrying white people. We felt it was an improvement to be brown and brown and brown. So that's what we did. That's why we're brown. That was our mindset. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Black power and black is beautiful.
And honestly, that's what kept our high genetic diversity versus other people. And we have to understand too that I want to dispel a myth because one of the myths, it's not really a myth, but it's kind of a truth to it as well. So when the Europeans came over, one of the ways in which a lot of the Native Americans, red Native Americans, died off is because of the diseases that the Europeans brought over and the disease blankets, like they say, or what have you. Um, those things like that were likely not to be that much of a prevailing factor for us because again we have high genetic diversity. And so when you look at the benefits of high genetic diversity, here's what it is: increased adaptability, um, evolutionary potential, resistance to disease, and population stability. So unlike the Native Americans, we were able to persist. Alan.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? I thought I brought this person up.
Me,
Okay, go ahead.
peace,
Oh,
family, peace.
hey.
Wani, Nikki the God, Professor Allen. I just wanted to first ask, is native, the term native and aboriginal, are those, because I know native is like federally recognized. Is aboriginal federally recognized?
Well,
Here in this country,
And I,
Right, or is it
and I
like the,
also want to add something too. Assuming that the question is
hold
true,
on,
or
hold on, line legal. You're talking out of
question is
turn.
true.
Yeah, you need to wait your turn, bro. Um, what before line legal interrupted you? Where were you going with that, Your Highness?
is native federally recognized and indigenous federally recognized, or is it just native? Like, is native the only thing? Because I always
Native
like,
American, yeah.
Yeah.
so so they're not interchangeable. They're distinguishably, are they different?
They're
Well,
just Native Americans.
yeah, I would go with native. The word aboriginal is a pejorative. If you break it apart, what does it mean to abhor? It means to hate, right? Um, Original means the original. So again, back to the beginning of the space, it's all in language. It Aboriginal means I hate the original. So I bet you can guess who created that word.
I also noticed too how foreign, like the whole Pan-African movement, is almost like this pressure to Africanize us. Even when we give evidence of our history, it's almost like we're kind of beat down to accept this Pan-Africanism. And I'm noticing that it's usually like black foreigners. Like they're coming in our spaces and telling us who we are. And like it's really, we don't do that to other races and so, or other cultures. And I just feel like as a respect to our culture, can you guys please stop doing that, because we don't do that to you guys, and we have our own story. Um Also, all my people that's like in college, whoever like finishing this semester, I hope you guys have a wonderful finishing, and I hope you guys, end on a good note. I'll actually just finish my history class, and I'm noticing my history teacher, which is a white man, he conflates black history. He muddles it. He talks about the 1800s, but he doesn't mention us. Then he'll skip to the 1960s, and he'll only kind of mention the civil rights era as if that's our identity. That's
It's
our only
intentional.
identity.
Hmm.
And like I think that's another thing a lot of foreigners kind of don't understand. They see us through the lens of the 1920s to about to the 1960s, and like we've been here for hundreds of years. We've been here since the foundation of America. Please do not base our identity on 60 years. I mean, because my grandmother, my great great grandmother was born in the 1800s. That's a person that I can like research. So that's centuries. So when people be like, "Oh, you're from Africa, you're from Africa," it's just ironic that even with the DNA test, they're saying I'm from Africa, but all of my family that I'm being linked up with are American. If I'm from Nigeria, where are my ancestors? specifically where I should be linking up with some people, and it's not adding up at all. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, and um, I'm constantly, on a quest to really dig up my history, and also, even if they want to try to Africanize us and say that we're not native, okay, fine, we're not native, but give us our land back, because many Black Americans in the 17 and 1800s had land, and they took our land. So okay, you don't want to say we're a part of which we are a part of a tribe, and we do have a tribe, but give us our land. And I land my plane.
Well, that's very interesting that you brought that up. Um, the Lumbee people are the same genetic makeup as us, except it's flipped. They have more European and less black and very little Native American. So they're kind of, it's probably not showing up for them either, but they live on reservations and they've been federally recognized to some extent. They're triracial, basically, just like uh, us. We have even quad racial, but when they went to Congress to speak about their federal recognition, the Cherokee came over there and said, "You're not a Native American tribe." They didn't want them to be federally recognized. I don't know why that's a threat to them, another tribe winning recognition, but I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it was a threat. And they went over there to say, You're not real Native Americans because you're triracial. You have other things going on." And so they can become a tribe. And there's another tribe, I forget the name of it. They're 98% white. They're white. They're not even pretending to be Native American. They're admitting that 98% of the people on the reservation are white. So, with that being said, we are in fact a Native American tribe. Because if the Lumbee are a Native American tribe, we are, because it's the same thing. That's number one. Number two, we're the only group that was created here in America. Like I said earlier, Navajo people came over here as late as the 1500s. They have no amalgamation here. They just walked across the Bering Straits. And just because they look like some people that came earlier, oh, you're Native American. No, they're not. They're Siberian immigrants. They are Siberian and they came over here and they stayed. And Vikings were here before Navajo were here. So they're not Native American. I don't know why they get branded with this landmass and they try to pretend like the Austronesian people don't exist. And they try to pretend like our ethnicity was not formed here. We wouldn't exist had this activity happened over here on this land. We wouldn't be the genetic DNA background that we are now if it was not for being in North America under these circumstances. So they know we're the only group that was formed here, and they try to hide one part of our genetics. They deny another part in their cognitive dissonance on the other. And they just want us to be African. They think they can will us into being an ethnic group or a race that we're not. We're not even the same race as Africans. Africans are a race, and we're not a race, we're several races. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, real quick. It's interesting how how you say how these federally recognized tribes are so white. So apparently, my grandfather was from the Choctaw tribe, and I looked at the Choctaw queen today, and she's like blonde hair, blue eyes, a Choctaw queen. Let me post it in the.
This is true everywhere. I mean, it really, when I was younger and I went to the Caribbean islands all in a row, and I was brought to see some of the leaders, like, oh, this is this person. I was like, why are they all white? They don't even represent the people on the. I was just like, This doesn't make sense. They look like they have like 1%, African DNA, and they're ruling over people that are heavily melanated. So they did the same thing everywhere. They do the same thing on even on these leadership positions in with Native Americans. They did the same thing in Liberia. All of those people were mulatto. They're mulatto. They all had white daddies, and the white daddy was going to puppet Liberia from over here while getting rid of their spawn or giving them some little positions over there.
Yeah,
So,
as me and Wani have said in spaces ages ago, months ago, Dr. Jacob Carruthers identified that the British intelligence, which in a lot of ways English intelligence, is behind all this evil that's going on in the West. Um, British intelligence came up with a plan to install mulatto class leadership across the world, with an agenda. Um, you see that from Birmingham, Alabama to Cuba. Google leadership in South America, Central America, and notice that the leaders in these places tend to be kind of light skinned, you know? Well,
hmm
it's not a mistake. There was a movie, They Cloned Tyrone. I don't know who directed They Cloned Tyrone, but whoever directed it was genius. If you notice in They Cloned Tyrone,
Attila,
who?
Attila.
Oh, well, I'm just saying the direction was kind of, snitching on that whole Jacob Carruthers ism. If you look at the management class in they clone Tyrone, they're all like light skinned, half white looking management. Um, I brought up my hometown, Birmingham, Alabama, which is one of the first um, towns in the United States to have a true black upper middle class, however small. And I'm not going to bore y'all with that story, but the Davises, Angela Davis, was amongst the leadership class. I never figured out, nor did my parents ever figure out what her parents did, but her parents were very well off, living up on the hill in a mansion, and they looked half white. That's a reoccurring theme. Housing, what's on your mind?
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I'm in school just tonight. I can't keep up with all the words Wani's using and
yes,
everything.
you can.
She's losing me. But I have a few questions. One is that isn't it basically boils down to the money when it comes to Black Americans? When you
Yes.
talk about the Indians and you know uh, accepting us.
Yes. Hmm.
A- And another thing is like they try to put us over there in all these countries in Africa and everything. You Black Americans have this thing where is that they know what they connected to. You know, I have no connection to Africa whatsoever. Spiritually I have no connection, but here I do. Pure and simple. And they just want to keep us away from the money. How Wani was talking about one of the groups at 95% white. How they get classified as Indian? Because the government and the federal government wants to keep the money in their pocket. It's basically boils down to the money. They don't want to see Black America come up. Is that true or false, Wani? Hello?
Yes. Say that again. My mic was stuck.
I said they just want to keep us from the money, not being
Yes.
accepted as Indians.
Yes. We're the
And
only people that are indigenous here. I mean, we are an ethnogenesis. However, Native Americans are similar to the people on the other side of the Bering Strait. I mean, like I said, the Navajo just came over here. So what have they been doing? They're not Native Americans. but they are hell bent on keeping that status so they can keep the money, and they want to pretend like we just, don't exist.
Took the words right out of my mouth. And every time they talk about take your DNA and everything, they always have like over 40% of us coming from Europe, 5% coming from Africa. They just don't want to place us here in America when you take these DNA tests. I think the DNA test is what's the most famous one everybody takes?
23andMe or Ancestry.
I think it's another.
What is going on? First, I couldn't unmute. Now I can't hear anything.
Oh, somebody just muted me. Oh, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, there's an echo though. Go ahead.
But yeah, they always want to place us in Europe and Africa, and we was born and raised here for hundreds of years, even thousands. And it's like every time you hear about these red Indians getting all this money on these reservations and stuff like that, and they know we connected to this land, and they, no matter how we fight and stuff, they like one step of ahead of us. No, we got to keep fighting, and we can't give them nothing. And they know what's really good with us. They know that we're from this land. Because no matter how far, no matter how much you dig anywhere, they're going to turn up black. And
That's absolutely right.
I have one more thing
Go ahead.
I wanted to address. That guy that was just on talk, he's comedic, that's his name. He's either two things. He's either Dominican or he's Puerto Rican. He's from New York. He was talking about how black people like eating chillers. He was very disrespectful. He was on Tariq Nasheed's space. He's very disrespectful. He's not black. Tariq blew him up saying you can't get no reparations. He's Puerto Rican or Dominican, so he just be strolling, coming through here, making it hot. So the next time you hear him come through, Professor, you know what to do, all right?
But I'm like a cat playing with a mouse.
I thank y'all. I'm gonna fall back. You know, I love listening to you guys. Thank you very much. I land
Thank
my plane.
you. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you, bro.
I also noticed too, like in museums and certain history museums, like in Chicago, when they speak of the Native American tribes, they only start in South America. They never they haven't really, like, we see those tribes in Mississippi, and yes, they're white, but they're not delving into the history of the Mississippi tribes, the Louisiana tribes, the ones in Florida. It's like the history is only painting the picture from South America. It's interesting.
These Mississippians, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't show what a lot of these people look like. We're just stuck with the Native Americans that we see here. We're not able to see what people looked 20,000 years ago, but we already went over that. They didn't have the skull morphologies um, that long ago. So, some of those people that went across the Bering Straits, they didn't look like these people that we see here. So, oh, go ahead, to Black.
Okay, it's interesting that you said that the Navajo stay on the reservations and try to preserve their little genetic makeup. Uh, okay, when most immigrants come to America, they usually go to areas where it's already their type of immigrants already residing. Like most Spaniards gonna go to like a Spanish enclave, Jewish people gonna go to like a Jewish enclave, and etc. And most of them intermix and try to assimilate into the little enclaves. So back to the genetic makeup, you can really kind of say, tell me if I'm wrong, that they are more exclusively genetically like the same as themselves that we are, since we like most people, if they do assimilate or try to blend into our culture, they most likely gonna mix with us, or every other generation of white people, they'll at least try to make sure they have a Meghan Markle to preserve their lineage of another 5 generations. Am I kind of right or wrong about that?
You mean, are they more
Are they more like
similar to?
secluded?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
and
similar to.
similar.
Yeah, they're similar to where they were when they went across the Bering Strait. However, we know the Native Americans that are here the longest on the East Coast, they do have admixture um, from close proximity sex. And a lot of white people ran and lived on the reservations with Native Americans. They ran away. They didn't want to be bothered. See, the English were beating everybody up. So all of these white people that weren't English were hiding out from them, and they had close proximity sex with Native Americans and Black Americans, people that ran away, people that were free. Um, yeah, that happened.
And I want to also add that the reason that a lot of these companies don't have a large test deposit of so-called Native Americans in there, um, or the ones at least from in these reservations, is because of the fact that a lot of them in those reservations are pretendians. They won't say that though, but they are pretendians, and or they're so admixed like us to the point where they don't have an origin either. So they're left to use proxies. So if you look into a lot of these DNA of an NCBI or nature.com or whatever, they're using Latinos as proxies to Native Americans, and even they'll admit that they're pseudo ancestors because they're also highly admixed. So we have a bunch of admixed peoples, and they're using them as proximity to us to codify our existence or how much Native American admixture we have to in comparison to them. They do the same thing with Nigerians. They use Nigerians with proximity to us, even though they say they admit that they are inadequate proxies to us. It's all a game. A lot of these DNA tests are full of bullshit, to be honest. I'm sorry to say. That's just what it is.
They are. I just use them roughly as a guideline, but I rely on my genealogy, and I've taken those other whole genome tests. They're a little bit more sensitive, but that's you're right. Um, they're playing a lot of games, and it's political. You have Native Americans, they don't want to be dethroned as the harmed group here in America, and nobody cares if we're uncomfortable or if we're disoriented. They just want to make sure that the Native American feels oriented, that they feel safe and secure as being the harmed individual in this country. They want to pretend like there was only three individuals, slaves, Native Americans, and the European. They don't even want to admit there are other Europeans here that they were fighting with viciously. They don't want to admit a lot of things. They don't want to admit that there was another group of indigenous people here, even though they have admitted it. That's why I put the scientific study up there. They have admitted it, but it's still up to narratives. Okay, they've admitted it, but the Native American is still fighting it. Just like if you think it was us that said the Olmec looked black. It wasn't us. It was scientists. It was white scientists that said the Olmec looked black. And then they proceeded to study the heck out of them to see where they came from. They didn't understand it. They're still down there uh, finding more faces that don't belong in that area. So apparently, a lot of action was going on over there. Some people say it's the Mende tribe that sailed over. Some say it's this. They don't look like Aboriginals. And when I look at their faces, they do look like West Africans. So guess some West Africans came over. But again, you have to realize how long people have had to do this. They've had a lot of time. People that are Aboriginal and the Negritos, they've had tens of thousands of years of a head start on other groups. So were they there? Sure, they were. They were everywhere. The other groups, we don't know because they're younger groups. We don't know who got here. We know the Vikings got here. They're even saying that maybe the Druids were here, but not, not that early. But we know that they were. And the white boy lied for years. All through my school years, they said no, that's just hearsay. The Vikings weren't here. The Vikings were most definitely here before the English. They had great sailing ships and they knew how to use them and they used them. And guess what they didn't do? They didn't come here and kill everybody. They also didn't give everybody diseases, which is interesting. They didn't knock off 90% of the population. What's up with that? Like, why not? They were from Europe, but they did not kill all the Native Americans with their biotoxins. They actually traded with them. I know that for a fact. They traded with my ancestors and wrote about it. So they had close proximity sex and they didn't kill everybody with their germs. And they traded with them and they didn't kill everybody with their germs. But the Englishmen and the Spanish people get off the ship and everybody gets sick immediately. That's very interesting. Somebody ought to look into that. Who's next?
I thought the Vikings was vicious. Wasn't they savages?
Yes, see, we have to stop listening to what English people say. If they wanted to slap up some English people, they're going to portray them as barbarians and vicious. But yet, those same people came over here. They had a settlement where my family lived called in Sussex, Delaware. It was called New Sweden at the time. Now it's Sussex, Delaware. And my ancestors, my grandfather, my mother's father, was from that area, and they most definitely traded. And the only problem they had was they called my family rascals. Rascals was the worst term that we were called by the Swedish because we didn't trap enough furs. They had us, oh, you owe us this many furs. It was like there's not enough animals, you greedy Swede. So that was the only argument that was had. And as you see, they did not kill each other. The Vikings didn't get scalped. None of that happened. They just lived there on that area and blended into one group of people. And basically, they are the typical American mix.
So the Viking was considered a bad person, especially through the movies. Is that correct?
Yes, they were considered barbaric because they beat up the English and others.
What's the time? I want to ask you a question. What's the time stamp on the statues down there in Mexico? Olmec statues. You know the
Time stamp. They do have them being in a certain period before the Maya. Let me see if I can get you a good date.
I just wanted to say that the Choctaw Treaty was in 1830. And you already know we was here way before that. So I just think that's interesting that these tribes were started uh, in the 1800s during the when black Americans were like doing all these inventions and coming up with all these wonderful things. All of a sudden all these nations are started. Where did they come from? We was here before 1830.
Mm-hmm. So it says the Olmec started around 1200 BCE.
Okay. And on the back of the Olmec's heads is braids. Is that correct?
Yes, they do have braids on some of them and hats and stuff.
And that's the one that they don't show. They don't show the braids on. They only show the face.
That's good enough. I mean, the face is a face.
Absolutely.
White people don't have certain profiles. Like on the Sphinx in Egypt, that's not a white person's profile or an Arab person's profile. It's very distinct. It's not even every African's profile, it's a specific group of Africans. So they can't lie like that. I mean, we can see, they can gaslight, which is what they do. Go ahead, Beauty.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to talk, Wani. Wani, my phone is messed up.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me just a little bit?
Are you on a headphone?
No, I broke my tablet. I broke a couple.
Mm,
Yeah, I just want to say something real quick, so I gotta yell into my mic. Um, did you know that a lot of people listen to our gospel music all over the world? I never knew that.
I
My
just
aunt,
heard that recently. Yeah, in Africa, I heard that. And in
my
Asia,
my aunt, they still heavy in gospel. They still go to church. And so I was on vacation, I was listening to like they band players and things like that. They was in Aruba. They was all over. And I didn't know that the whole daggone world play our gospel music and intertwine our gospel into theirs. I did not know that we were saluted all around the world. I listened to it and it was just like, it's funny when I get on this app, how many people that claim to hate us, that they sit there and cherish us in another way without giving us thanks, without giving us grace. Everybody in the whole world listens to our gospel music. I just wanted to say that.
you're absolutely right. I was Googling each country to see which countries played our music, and I could not find one country on the planet that did not have a hip hop. I don't care what it is. Bulgarian hip hop. You could just Google anything, and they have hip hop. Inuit jazz. I went to Greenland expecting to see Eskimos and Inuit people. Nope, they had a hip hop contest going on over there. So that was weird because it was very cold and I couldn't even move. So I didn't even know how they were moving. Anyway, we're popular and they have leapt upon gospel music now. They already wore out rock and roll, jazz, hip hop. So now they're going back. They're going to dig up everything. They'll be singing Negro spirituals over in Korea next. Am I lying or am I lying?
No, you're telling the truth. And the reason why I say that, because one thing that we create, we always throw it away, and everybody else picks it up. When I tell you that they picked it up, that's one thing I learned on my vacation. I never seen the whole world pick up gospel music. So while we was crying and telling our pleas and singing our music from the soul, it was like, okay, we're gonna move on to the next. And while we was trying to move on to the next, they was picking up our spirit. And I'ma just say this: we can't just instantly throw everything we built and created away. That's a no-no. And even if you do battle rap, don't throw our shit away. We are the creators. And I don't know how we're so good and magnificent of what we do, but everybody copies everything we do. And I'm going to drop down. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, you too. It's very strange because nobody is trying to steal belly dancer music or anybody else's music from around the world. It's just not a thing. Um, I don't know. They're just, I mean, our music is very layered. It's got that je ne sais quoi, that special something, of course, us. But it is just amazing. The people that dislike us and will play our music and try to convince us that they're not playing our music. If I would run up on some Swedish guy right now playing rock and roll and go, Black people created rock and roll, do you know he would die? He would fall off on the stage and die and deny the whole thing. 9 times out of 10, they're up there playing, thinking they're doing something, and they're not doing anything except taking someone else's stuff. But I didn't always feel this way. I remember when I heard Sade, I was like, I'm glad somebody's got some jazz type music playing, and it was beautiful. I love that music. But again, we dropped it. We just didn't keep it up. And I remember when it happened, my father played jazz. So I remember when jazz just was like, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. It's time for disco and all these other things, which is fine. But we should have kept it going because everybody else jumped on it, and now they're over there in the UK saying that white people really created. How is a guy in the UK claiming that somebody, UK didn't create diddly shit? So they need to really shut up. They're second generation thieves. First, we have to wait for the white Americans to rob us. Then the UK people rob them. Okay? They don't even know how the game goes. After that, the immigrants leapt upon it and started saying they created Chicago drill. It's called Chicago drill. Do they even know what Chicago is? I don't think so. I really don't.
Yeah, it's like our brother Tariq Nasheed said, what they drilling with? They don't have no guns over
Them little knives and Chanel's.
there. Very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, are FBAs Indian? The answer is no. Keep in mind that the misnomer, the word Indian, came from Europeans who allegedly got lost, saw melanated people, and said, "Hey, I'm in India." Keep in mind what we said in the beginning, that naming is absolute power. So, in essence, the Europeans who came to this land through the power of naming created a narrative. Dr. Sharshy McIntyre says that we said, the late great Dr. Sharshy McIntyre said that we live in a European narrative. Also, actually, she said we live in a European nightmare. In the late 90s, Dr. McIntyre, while she was still living, was woke up. She had lupus real bad. She woke up in pain and was flipping channels and had an epiphany. She turned on ID Discovery and the detective files in the first 48, and she said channel after channel after channel was just death, destruction, somebody's head getting blown off. And she had dawned on us that she's living in the unconscious mind of a European who's struggling with the young Adrias. Keep in mind that during the young Adrias, or as the Europeans call it, the worm, spelled with a W, the worm or worm, I don't know how to pronounce it. And nobody knows why it's called the worm, dealt with
Wait, how's
whole
it spelled? W?
WURM, Verm,
W-U-R-M. Thank you.
Vermian ice age, and nobody knows why. It doesn't make any sense. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe somebody knows and they're just not telling me. But during that Vermian ice age, the European culture was nurtured into absolute hostility. Violence was a virtue. And according to several scholars, including Dr. Sharshy McIntyre, um, this violence, this brutality is playing in the unconscious mind of Europeans, and the unconscious mind. This movie playing in the unconscious mind finds its way bubbling to the top, and we're living in that narrative. That narrative is not our narrative, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying that to say that they created a narrative where Indians were somewhere that Indians weren't. Well, I learned earlier in the space from our sister Wani Spots that the term Indian was a creation out of the mind of Europeans, which is interesting in itself. Um, okay, moving forward, I wanted to identify why um, why it's important to keep in mind that FBAs have a different lineage than Indians. According to Dr. Claude Anderson, he says each time in history, either before or after a war, when the American economy was expanding and we could have offered material economic benefits to black, a new influx of immigrants or refugees arrived to fill the void and further exile blacks from fruitful participation in national life. Now, that's according to scholar and historian Dan Lacey. Now, the reason why I brought that up is earlier in the space we had an issue arise as to several of our guests wanted to know why um, Africans, certain Africans, not all, I'm not putting them all in the same bag. I know Africans in Ghana who are just absolute writers, but we do have members from the diaspora that want to make sure that we identify as um, as such, and the reason why was just identified by Dr. Claude Anderson is for reasons of finesse. Um, if you put us in a box, you can control us. Ladies and gentlemen, everything is about narrative. Narrative is about words. In conclusion, we've taken the power into our own hands and identified ourselves, thereby identifying our destiny. We've called ourselves foundational. What does a foundation do on a house? It keeps it sturdy, it's solid, right? A good foundation is solid. So, without further ado, I would say let's stay solid in our quest for reparation, our quest for justice, and our quest for knowledge. With that being said, do I have anybody have any closing remarks?
I just want to say, warning, it's already too late. The Asians are already trying to infiltrate the gospel music.
I saw them singing. Yeah, they're very good mimics. My father used to um, be a music director in the Philippines, and he said they will play a fly on the page. They will mimic the hell out of anything, but if you ask them to improvise, they don't know what you're talking about. They're like, they'll copy another person's solo, but they can't do what we do. We're channeling that from somewhere. We're just channeling it.
That's it.
So
Isn't it the reason why ragtime was looked down upon because it was nothing but improvisation?
Yes, they can't stand that, and I love it.
that's so fascinating. I when I moved to Memphis, I couldn't find a job uh, in a law firm. Just left a leading law firm, but I got 20 interviews. But when I showed my name, sounds like a Caucasian, and my resume is impressive. And I'd show up, and they'd all look at me confused, like, "Are you him? That's you?" Well, anyway, long story short, the only job I could get that year was as a kindergarten teacher, which I wasn't even licensed to do. But I did it for a year. But anyway, I was at a private school, and the majority of my parents were Chinese. Yeah, most majority of my parents were research scientists who worked at St. Jude Cancer Hospital. Well, I had one parent. They all were deep, like totally brilliant. But I had one parent that was just exceptionally deep. She was an MD, PhD. And what this lady did for a living was create cancer medication for children based off their genome. She would draw blood from a child who was sick, map their genome, and create specific cancer medication just that's perfectly tailored to that child. I can't even comprehend how she did that. Well, one day she came to pick her daughter up, and me and her were chatting, and I was picking her brain as to how do you even go about thinking to do something like map somebody's genome and make medicine out of their DNA? And she stopped me. She said, I said, "You're brilliant." She said, "No, no, 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 no. Well, I'm not brilliant. You're brilliant." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Come here." And we walked outside in Memphis, and she pointed at a wall that had graffiti all over. It's beautiful graffiti. She said, Black Americans are brilliant because you can create that. I don't create, I just do." And that stuck with me for a while. That kind of goes to what Wani was saying about channeling. What we do comes from somewhere else. It's magical. It's alchemy. Wani, any closing remarks?
No, let's do a part two of this. This is fun.
Will do. So let it be written, let it be done. We're going to have part two, our FBA's Indian, where the term Indian originates, supported by Dr. Claude Anderson. I might get another scholar to support our topic, but this will be continued. I enjoyed y'all, and I'll see y'all around with Puppy Akute and Lala Vube. Peace out. Good night.
Good night.